What happens when one of Hollywood's most beloved actors walks into what should be a routine morning interview, only to face an ambush that spirals into absolute chaos? In just 34 seconds of questioning, a respected television host's true colors are exposed, leading to one of the most explosive exits in morning television history. The studio lights were blazing as usual that morning. Pedro Pascal settled into the bright orange couch, his warm smile greeting the cameras and the live studio audience. He had come to talk about his latest project, a film that had critics buzzing and fans eager for more. The atmosphere started friendly enough, with Savannah Guthrie offering the standard welcome and pleasantries that viewers had come to expect from their morning programming. "So Pedro, thank you for being here," Savannah began, her smile perfectly practiced. "We're excited to have you." "Thank you for having me," Pedro responded, his genuine warmth immediately apparent. "Always happy to be here." But something shifted in Savannah's demeanor almost immediately. Her smile tightened, and there was an edge to her voice that caught Pedro slightly off guard. "You know, I have to say," Savannah continued, leaning forward in a way that felt more confrontational than conversational, "there's been a lot of talk about your recent comments regarding the industry. Some people are saying you've become, well, a bit difficult to work with." The audience fell silent. This was not the lighthearted interview anyone had expected. Pedro's expression shifted from friendly to confused. "I'm sorry, what comments are you referring to?" he asked, his tone still polite but clearly caught off guard. "Oh, come on," Savannah said, waving her hand dismissively. "You know exactly what I'm talking about. The interviews where you've been critical of production practices, the way you've spoken about certain directors. It comes across as very ungrateful, don't you think?" Hoda Kotb, sitting beside Savannah, shifted uncomfortably in her seat. "Well, I think Pedro has always been very thoughtful in his—" "I'm asking Pedro," Savannah cut her off sharply, not even looking at her co-host. Her eyes remained fixed on Pedro, with an intensity that felt almost hostile. Pedro took a breath, clearly trying to maintain his composure. "I think there's been a misunderstanding. I've spoken about the importance of safe working conditions and treating crew members with respect. I don't see how that's being difficult or ungrateful." "Right, but you're an actor," Savannah said, her voice dripping with condescension. "Your job is to show up, say your lines, and collect your paycheck. Why do you feel the need to make everything so political?" The audience gasped audibly. Even the camera operators seemed to tense up. This was crossing a line, and everyone in the studio could feel it. "I don't think advocating for basic human decency is political," Pedro said, his voice still measured, but with a steel edge creeping in. "And I think reducing what actors do to just showing up and saying lines is pretty reductive." Al Roker, who had been standing by the weather screen, walked closer to the main seating area. "Hey, maybe we should talk about the actual film," he suggested, in trying to steer the conversation back to safer ground. "I heard the action sequences are incredible." "Al, I've got this," Savannah snapped, shooting him a look that could freeze water. "I'm conducting this interview." She turned back to Pedro, her expression hardening even further. "You come from a different background than most actors in Hollywood. Some would say you should be more grateful for the opportunities you've been given instead of constantly complaining." The air in the studio became thick with tension. Everyone watching knew that what Savannah had just implied crossed every possible line of professionalism and decency. Pedro's jaw tightened, and for the first time, real anger flashed in his eyes. "What exactly are you trying to say?" he asked, his voice low and controlled. "I'm saying that maybe someone in your position should think twice before biting the hand that feeds them," Savannah replied, her tone icy. "There are thousands of actors who would kill for the roles you've been handed." "Handed?" Pedro repeated, his eyebrows raising. "You think I was handed my career?" "Well, it certainly helps when you fit a certain, shall we say, diversity quota that Hollywood is so obsessed with these days," Savannah said with a fake sweet smile that made her words even more venomous. The entire studio seemed to collectively hold its breath, Hoda's mouth dropped open in shock. Al Roker looked absolutely furious. Even the crew members were exchanging horrified glances. "Savannah, that's completely inappropriate," Hoda finally managed to say, her voice shaking with a mix of anger and disbelief. "Hi, I think we need to—" "I don't recall asking for your input, Hoda," Savannah shot back without breaking eye contact with Pedro. "This is my segment." Pedro stood up slowly from the couch, his body language radiating controlled fury. "I'm going to give you one chance to apologize for what you just said." "Apologize?" Savannah laughed, a sharp, cruel sound. "For what? Telling the truth? You know what your problem is, Pedro. You're too sensitive. You can't handle a real conversation. You want everyone to just blow sunshine at you and tell you how wonderful you are." "A real conversation doesn't involve racist implications and insulting someone's entire career," Pedro said, his voice rising now. "What you just said was disgusting." "Oh, here we go." Savannah rolled her eyes dramatically. Playing the victim card. Typical. "Savannah." "Stop!" Al interjected firmly, stepping closer. "This has gone way too far." "You need to stay in your lane, Al," Savannah hissed at him. "Go back to your weather maps and let the real journalists handle the interviews." Al looked stunned, hurt flashing across his face, before anger replaced it. Real journalists don't ambush their guests with personal attacks. The camera continued rolling, capturing every moment of the unraveling situation. The producers in the control room were frantically trying to decide whether to cut to commercial, but the train wreck happening live was too compelling, too shocking to interrupt. "You know what I find interesting?" Savannah continued, turning her attention back to Pedro, as if Al hadn't even spoken. "You're all high and mighty about respect and decency, but you threw a tantrum on the set of your last show. I heard you made a crew member cry." "That's absolutely not true," Pedro said, his voice shaking with anger now. "Where are you even getting this information?" "I have sources," Savannah said smugly. "Good sources. They tell me you're a nightmare behind the scenes, that all this nice guy stuff is an act." "Your sources are liars," Pedro said flatly, "and you're irresponsible for repeating lies on national television without fact-checking." "Are you calling me a liar?" Savannah's voice went up an octave, her face flushing red. "I'm calling your sources liars," Pedro clarified. "But if you're choosing to repeat their lies as truth, then yeah, that makes you a liar too." Savannah stood up abruptly, matching Pedro's stance. "How dare you? Do you know who I am? I've been doing this for over 20 years. I've interviewed presidents, world leaders, actual important people. You're just an actor. You play dress-up for a living. And yet, I have more integrity than you're showing right now," Pedro fired back. Hoda stood up as well, placing herself slightly between them. "Okay, everyone needs to calm down. We're live. We need to—" "Sit down, Hoda," Savannah commanded. "This doesn't concern you." "It absolutely concerns me," Hoda said, her usually cheerful voice now firm and serious. "You're destroying this show's reputation right now. You're out of line." "I'm out of line?" Savannah whirled on her. "I'm trying to ask real questions instead of the softball garbage we usually serve up. Someone needs to hold these entitled celebrities accountable." "Accountable for what exactly?" Pedro asked. "For having opinions? For standing up for working conditions? For existing while being Latino?" "Don't you dare make this about race," Savannah snapped. "I have plenty of friends who—" "Stop," Pedro held up his hand. "Just stop. I've heard enough. The fact that you're even about to give me the 'I have friends' speech tells me everything I need to know about you." Craig Melvin, who had been watching from the news desk in stunned silence, finally spoke up. "Savannah, seriously, you need to apologize. This is unacceptable." "Oh, now Craig wants to chime in," Savannah said mockingly. "What's next? Is Carson going to pop in from the other room to tell me how to do my job too?" "It's not about telling you how to do your job," Craig said, walking over. "It's about basic human decency. You've insulted a guest. when you've made inappropriate comments and you've been disrespectful to your own colleagues. I've been doing the job that you all are too scared to do, Savannah insisted, asking tough questions, not letting celebrities control the narrative. There's a difference between tough questions and a personal attack, Al said. And you crossed that line about 5 minutes ago. Pedro shook his head, a look of profound disappointment on his face. You know what's really sad? I came here excited to talk about a project I'm passionate about. A film that means something. And instead, I got ambushed by someone who clearly had an agenda from the start. I don't have an agenda, Savannah protested. I'm a journalist. Journalists report facts, Pedro said. They don't make up stories about people crying on set. And they don't imply that someone's success is only because of their ethnicity. They don't belittle their colleagues on live television. You don't get to lecture me. Savannah's voice was rising to a near shout now. You don't get to come into my studio and tell me how to do my job. Your studio? Hoda interjected incredulously. Savannah, this isn't your studio. This is a show with a team, and you're not the only person here. I'm the lead anchor, Savannah said, her sense of entitlement fully on display now. That means something. It should mean you have more responsibility to act professionally, Al said, not less. Pedro started unhooking his microphone. I'm done here. I'm not going to stand here and be insulted. You can't just leave, Savannah said, but there was a hint of panic in her voice now, as if she was suddenly realizing how badly this had gone. We're in the middle of an interview. An interview implies a conversation, Pedro said calmly as he removed the mic pack from his belt. What this was an attack, and I don't have to sit here and take it. If you leave, you'll never be invited back, Savannah threatened. Good, Pedro said simply. I wouldn't want to come back to a place where this kind of behavior is tolerated. He handed his microphone to a nearby production assistant, who took it with a sympathetic look. The young woman whispered, I'm so sorry to him, which he acknowledged with a small nod. This is ridiculous, Savannah sputtered. You're being completely unprofessional. The irony of you saying that is truly unbelievable, Pedro said, shaking his head. You spent the last 15 minutes insulting me, lying about me, making racist implications, and disrespecting your own colleagues. But sure, I'm the unprofessional one for refusing to sit here and take it. I never said anything racist, Savannah insisted, her face now bright red. You're twisting my words. Your words don't need twisting, Pedro replied. They were clear enough on their own. Hoda reached out and touched Pedro's arm gently. I'm so sorry, she said quietly. This shouldn't have happened. You didn't deserve any of this. Thank you, Pedro said to her, his expression softening for a moment. I appreciate that. He turned to Al and Craig. Thank you both for speaking up. That took courage. It's just basic decency, Al said, which apparently is in short supply this morning. Savannah looked around at her colleagues, seeming to finally realize that she had completely isolated herself. You're all taking his side after everything I've done for this show? This isn't about sides, Craig said. This is about right and wrong, and what you did was wrong. I was doing my job, Savannah repeated, but her voice had lost some of its conviction. No, Hoda said firmly. You were on a power trip. There's a difference. Pedro looked directly into the camera, addressing the audience at home. To anyone watching, I hope you know that I have nothing but respect for most of the people who work here, and for this show's legacy. What happened today doesn't reflect on them. It reflects on one person's choices. He turned to leave the set, now walking with his head held high despite the chaos swirling around him. Don't you walk away from me, Savannah called after him. I'm not done with this interview. Pedro stopped and turned back one last time. Yes, you are, because I'm leaving. And unlike you, I know when something is over. You're making a huge mistake, Savannah said, her voice taking on a desperate quality. Walking out on a live interview. Do you know how bad this makes you look? Not as bad as you look right now, Pedro said simply. Excuse me? Savannah's voice went shrill. I look perfectly fine. I'm doing my job. Your job is to interview people, not attack them, Pedro said. Your job is to inform viewers, not spread lies. Your job is to have integrity, and you've shown none today. How dare you question my integrity? Savannah shot back. I have won awards for my journalism. I have broken major stories. I have interviewed everyone who matters in this world. And yet, here you are, Pedro said, throwing a tantrum because your guest won't let you bully him. All those awards and achievements, and this is how you choose to conduct yourself. Savannah's hands were shaking now. Whether from anger or something else, it was hard to tell. You have no idea what it's like to be in this chair. The pressure, the expectations, the constant scrutiny. That doesn't give you the right to take it out on other people, Pedro replied. Everyone has pressure. Everyone faces scrutiny. That's not an excuse for cruelty. Cruelty? Savannah laughed bitterly. You think I'm being cruel? I'm being honest. Someone has to be willing to ask the hard questions. There's nothing hard about making up lies, Pedro countered. There's nothing brave about using your platform to tear someone down. Hard questions require research, preparation, and respect. You've shown none of that. Hoda stepped closer to Pedro. You don't have to keep engaging with this, she said softly. You can just go. She's right, Al agreed. You've said your piece. You don't owe anyone here anything more. But Pedro shook his head slightly. I want to make sure this is absolutely clear. Because if I just walk away without saying everything that needs to be said, she'll spin this however she wants. He turned back to Savannah, his expression serious. You started this interview with an agenda. You had already decided what narrative you wanted to push before I even sat down. That's not journalism. That's manipulation. I did not have an agenda, Savannah protested weakly. I simply asked questions based on information I received. Information from unnamed sources that you never verified, Pedro said. Information that conveniently painted me in the worst possible light. And when I tried to defend myself, you doubled down with even more outrageous accusations. They weren't accusations, Savannah said. They were observations. Observations? Pedro's voice rose. You said I was handed my career because of diversity quotas. You implied I was ungrateful. You claimed I made crew members cry, which is a complete fabrication. Those aren't observations. Those are character assassinations. The audience, which had been silent for much of this exchange, suddenly erupted in applause. They were clapping for Pedro, supporting him, validating his response. Savannah's face turned an even deeper shade of red. Oh, so now we're playing to the crowd, she said bitterly. Is that what this is? The crowd is responding to the truth, Craig interjected. Something you seem allergic to right now. Stay out of this, Craig, Savannah snapped. This is between me and him. It stopped being just between you two when you made it a spectacle on live television, Craig responded firmly. When you involved all of us by behaving this way on our show. Al actually laughed at that, a short bark of surprised amusement that he couldn't quite hold back. Even some of the crew members could be heard chuckling. Savannah's eyes blazed. This is not funny. None of this is funny. You're right, Pedro agreed. It's not funny. It's sad. It's sad that you thought you could treat someone this way. It's sad that you think your position gives you the right to bully people. And it's really sad that you still don't seem to understand what you did wrong. I didn't do anything wrong, Savannah insisted stubbornly. I asked legitimate questions. You made up lies, implied I only got jobs because of my ethnicity, dismissed my entire profession, and insulted your own colleagues, Pedro listed off. If you think that's legitimate questioning, then you need to seriously reevaluate your career. The control room was in complete chaos. Producers were shouting into headsets, executives were being called, and everyone was trying to figure out how to handle what was unfolding live on air. But they let it continue, perhaps recognizing that cutting away now would only make things worse. You know what your real problem is, Savannah said, grasping at straws now. You can't handle a strong woman asking you tough questions. That's what this is really about, isn't it? Your fragile male ego can't take it. Hoda actually gasped at that. Savannah, stop. Just stop talking. You're making this so much worse. She's right, Craig added. You need to just let him leave. I don't need you telling me what to do, Craig, Savannah snapped. Clearly you do, Craig shot back, his patience clearly exhausted. Because your judgment right now is severely impaired. Pedro just shook his head again. I'm not doing this anymore. Enjoy your show. He started walking toward the exit again. Savannah, in a last-ditch effort to maintain some semblance of control, called out loudly, Security! Don't let him leave the building. Everyone froze. Even Pedro stopped and turned around slowly, his expression a mixture of disbelief and anger. Did you seriously just try to have me detained? He asked, his voice dangerously quiet. You're disrupting a live broadcast, Savannah said, but her voice wavered. A broadcast that you turned into a circus, Al said, stepping forward. Security isn't going to stop him, Savannah. He has every right to leave. I'm the host, Savannah said, her voice almost pleading now. I make the calls here. Not anymore, you don't, came a voice from off camera. One of the executive producers had stepped onto the set, something that never happened during a live broadcast. Savannah, I need you to step away from the desk. Now. Savannah's face went pale. What? You can't be serious. Dead serious, the producer said. This interview is over. We're going to commercial. You can't do this to me, Savannah said, her voice rising toward hysteria. I'm Savannah Guthrie. I'm the face of this show. And you just damaged that face beyond recognition, the producer said bluntly. Step away from the desk. Savannah looked around at her colleagues, searching for support, but found none. Hoda looked away. Al crossed his arms. Craig just shook his head sadly. You're all going to regret this, Savannah said, her voice shaking. All of you. The only person who's going to have regrets is you, the producer said. Now please, let's go. Pedro watched this unfold with a strange expression, something between vindication and sadness. I didn't want this, he said quietly. I just wanted to talk about my film. I know, Hoda said, walking over to him. And I'm truly sorry. This should never have happened. None of us wanted this, Al agreed. But you handled it with more grace than most people would have. I just tried to stand up for myself, Pedro said. I shouldn't have had to, but I did. Savannah, being escorted off the set by the producer, turned back one more time. This isn't over, Pedro. Not by a long shot. Yeah, it is, Pedro said firmly. It's completely over. I'm going to walk out of here. You're going to deal with the consequences of your actions, and that's the end of it. You think you're so high and mighty? Savannah spat out. So morally superior. I think I know how to treat people with basic respect, Pedro corrected. That's not being superior. That's just being decent. As Savannah was finally led off the set, still protesting, the studio fell into a strange quiet. The audience sat in stunned silence. The crew looked shell-shocked. The remaining hosts stood awkwardly, unsure of what to do or say. Pedro took a deep breath, composing himself. I should go. We really are sorry, Craig said, for whatever it's worth. It's worth something, Pedro assured him. The fact that you all spoke up, that means a lot. It would have been easier to stay quiet. Not really, Al said. Staying quiet when someone's being treated like that, that's not easy at all. That's cowardice. Pedro smiled slightly at that, a genuine smile despite everything. Thank you. He made his way to the exit one final time. The production assistant who had taken his microphone earlier opened the door for him. As he reached the threshold, he paused and looked back at the set one more time. The bright lights, the cameras, The orange couch where just 20 minutes earlier he had sat down expecting a pleasant conversation about his work. Now it felt like a battlefield, and he had somehow ended up in a war he never wanted to fight. "Take care of yourselves," he said to Hoda, Al, and Craig. Then he walked through the door and was gone. The remaining hosts looked at each other, the weight of what had just happened settling over them like a heavy blanket. "Well," Hoda finally said, her voice hollow, "that was something." "That was a disaster," Al corrected. "An absolute disaster." "We need to go to commercial," Craig said, looking toward the control room. "Right now." As the show cut away, the studio erupted into chaos. Crew members rushed around, producers shouted into phones, and the remaining hosts tried to process what had just occurred. But Pedro was already in the hallway, walking toward the elevator with his head high and his dignity intact. He had come for an interview and ended up in a confrontation he never wanted. But he had stood his ground, refused to be bullied, and walked away on his own terms. The elevator doors opened, and he stepped inside. As they closed, shutting out the chaos behind him, he allowed himself a moment to breathe, to feel the anger and hurt and frustration of the last half hour. But he also felt something else. Pride. Pride that he hadn't backed down. A pride that he had stood up not just for himself, but for the principle that no one deserves to be treated with such blatant disrespect. The numbers on the elevator display counted down as he descended. With each floor, he felt himself letting go of a little more of the tension. By the time he reached the ground floor, he was ready to step out into the world and move forward. Behind him, the Today Show was in complete meltdown. But that was their problem now, not his. He had done what he came to do, maintain his integrity in the face of hostility. And that was enough.